All right, now we're recording. It's 5 o'clock. And with that, Tim O'Connor, super broker from the Hamptons, just said the word high rent district. And I can't think of a better way to start the conversation than the words high rent district. What does that mean in the Hamptons, high rent district? I didn't think there was any other kind of district in the Hamptons. What does that mean?
Oh, it's just something I like to use. It's better than south of the highways. Everybody likes to use south of the highway. So it's just a little acronym I like to put out there. It's be different.
So why do people want to be south of the highway? I thought everybody wanted to be on the ocean where they could see those big breakers.
Well, south of the highway is leading to the ocean. But it's become sort of an old phrase. Just because that's what your parents did. For me, south of the highway really doesn't play that well, but high rent does. It just makes it seem different.
So you are my my ace in the Hamptons, and so I'm going to ask you a couple questions just to get us oriented. What does it mean, the Hamptons? Are we talking Montauk all the way to Quogue?
You could, but really the Hamptons, I think for most people start in Southampton and go out to Montauk. Okay. And the Montauk angle of it really only added in about 5 or 6 years ago. So it really stopped at Amagansett before that.
And is it fair to ask, how big is that market? How many houses are we talking about, or people are we talking about from Southampton to Montauk?
I would not be able to gauge that. I have no idea, but it's about, in a normal off season, you have about 30% less of the population than you do in the height of the summer. And
right. July, is that different? Is that different now?
It is different now. It's different as a result of what's going on, of course, sure. East Hampton has actually started to become more of a year-round community. Everything stays open, all the restaurants, most of the stores do. On the weekends, they're actually thinking of keeping the parking lot ticket machines going all year round because there's so much activity. And it's a free parking. It's just that it gives you a 2-hour time limit that you can park in the lots. That just shows you that, you know, it's just becoming much more accessible. The train service continues, but now with people able to really work from anywhere, I think all the Hamptons is just going to be a very different place moving forward, even after we get this pandemic behind us.
Tim, based on you know, the exodus from New York, so to speak, and people have left in different ways, and people are going temporarily, this and that. Are you finding that? And we have a house in Southampton, and we're experiencing, we were there for 6 months, but we came back. And I'm just curious, from the people who are buying there, are you finding that they're not necessarily, what I encounter, they're not necessarily moving there, like leaving New York. They are essentially just, the people that are at least buying, they're adding another property and not selling New York.
Correct. That's what it does seem. The biggest buyers we had, well, of course, when it started, it was all renters. So March and most of April. Starting in May, it was all first-time homeowners that needed an escape hatch. They were left in a smaller apartment in the city and they had nowhere to go. So I just sold 2 different houses to different couples that were down in North Carolina. They actually had to come up here and quarantine for 14 days before they could come out. And we actually stopped FaceTime looking at houses because they were going so quickly that by the time they were even going to get here, the house was gone. Now I'm seeing it has gotten quieter, but it's still a lot of activity out here. And it's people who are at all price points, and the people who had something in maybe Aspen or Miami, thinking about selling that and having something more permanent closer to New York. But I am not really seeing anyone that is leaving New York permanently. I've not had one person like that yet.
Which, Rob, is different. I have a client who lived in Manhattan and had a house in the Hamptons. They sold both and have moved permanently to Greenwich. Is that what you find for Greenwich, is that people literally are just literally relocating?
Well, firstly, I'm sorry I couldn't help them. But thank you for fessing up. But it's a mix. So there isn't, I'd say on a normal year, I deal with quite a few people that own in New York and the Hamptons, and they tend to keep one or both. Sometimes they think they're still going to use the Hamptons, but they really don't as much. But generally, they're fed up of doing the trip once they start to have 2 or 3 kids, and they swap. I deal with 1 or 2 people a year that will be swapping out basically a Hamptons house for a Greenwich house, and then they kind of transition into Greenwich as a primary residence. This year, more currently this year, I'd say there was a lot of that initial flurry from the city that started out after the short-term rental market was not the only show in town. We had a lot of activity between 1.5 and 2 million. That was people that were that didn't have anything to sell, that were leaving. They just wanted out of the city. They didn't own anything, and they were moving out to the suburbs way younger than they would have done normally. So in the last 5 or 6 years, I've probably only had a couple of clients without children. In the last 5 months, the first 4 or 5 months coming out of COVID, I had 5 of them. So interestingly, demographics shifted quite a bit. It did go up the price curve very quickly, though, after that April-May period where I was very busy on the lower end for Greenwich. It went up. It went up the price point and a lot, and it became a lot broader appeal. But I would say when people move from the city, it really is the difference between the Hamptons and the suburbs here that we're a genuine primary residence. And always have been. The situations on the schools are probably a little bit different to the Hamptons, and I think it's it's probably quicker getting into the city from here than it is from the Hamptons.
Sure. Who has the better schools?
So I wouldn't say it's better or worse because it's not. As an agent, I don't think any of us, I can see a lot of names that I recognize on this call. I don't think there's a better or worse type of ranking. I think as far as being a proponent of Greenwich, I would say that the one thing that we have that other towns don't have is choices. So we do have very good public schools, but we also have a very good selection of private schools. We have a town that across the town, there's probably, by the time you get to middle and high school, 30% of people living here buy into private over public. So if different kids have different needs, or your needs change over time, Greenwich, you can kind of cover both bases in Greenwich. There are other towns in Connecticut with fantastic public schools as well. Westchester has various towns with what are considered extremely good public schools. They have less private school options, but then it becomes a conversation about very high taxation as well.
So I think this is the year that I'm interested in getting, I guess, past the stereotypes that families move to Greenwich because they want to put their kids in nice school systems close to where they work. Because families are now moving out to the Hamptons. And likewise, people have talked about the Hamptons as strictly a seasonal market with lousy schools. And what I learned a little bit earlier today from Tim is that they aren't beginning to invest in their schools. People are moving there to be full-time residents. And so that dynamic is changing as well.
Yeah, that takes a while.
We started to see a much bigger seasonal rental market, which has gotten everybody in Connecticut confused. Like, what?
Yeah.
People want to rent for just a month?
Well, that is, I have a client that has a very good business. It was good before, but it's even better this year. And he has a very large market share in short-term furnished rentals via Airbnb. He owns about 30 houses in town. But that's always been very underserved. It was obviously very busy this year. The rentals have been, I think 20 years ago, there probably, I heard that there was more of a summer rental market in Greenwich. I get a lot of inquiry. We all get a lot of inquiries in January, February. Most of them can't be satisfied, and then people do different things. This year it's been different. As those buyers were coming out the city, back to the original question, they were buying into moving to the suburbs, but some of them further up the price curve didn't want to pay that liquidity price of moving out of the city and selling their apartment. They either couldn't or didn't want to carry two houses. So that added extra fuel to the rental market, which was more back to the 1 year rentals, where the people felt like it would at least give them time for the Manhattan market to potentially rebound a little bit and for them to find their feet in a new town. So those rental dynamics have changed a lot, and it was also made a little trickier by the fact that we've been in a soft market for so long that a lot of our rental supply was from people that were waiting in the wings to sell, and now they've been given that opportunity, so our supply's been down too.
Tim, have you also been in a soft market for the last couple of years? Connecticut has been in kind of soft market, but you're a very different market.
We go with the stock market. So if the stock market is doing well and everyone's feeling flush, it's a big buying, and it's the reverse. It's a big renting season if that is not playing. But we've seen waves on the rental market over the last 3 years. It was very healthy, longer term, full season, Memorial Day to Labor Day. And then the next year, everybody was doing Airbnb and VRBO, and they really weren't even coming through agents. And then coming into this year, before the pandemic started, we saw the rental market pick back up again. But the sale market has, listen, there's been soft times by all means. We definitely felt after the tax code was changed and people were getting their first year of taxes and looking at it, things came to a screeching halt that kind of the end of March, beginning of April. And it was quiet in the sense of doing any deals, a lot of activity all summer. But then I did 2/3 of my business last year from September 15th to the end of the year. Because I think everybody just realized, okay, this is reality, and now let's move on. But it was very quiet right after the tax season came out a year ago.
Now, there's a lot of short-term rental restrictions there, aren't there?
There are, and they're really enforcing the rental registry. It came into play this year. If you didn't have one, you couldn't get a beach pass for your tenant. So we're not legally allowed to write a lease for less than 2 weeks. That's why the Airbnb and VRBO became so popular, because we're legally not allowed to. Now, there's a lot of people who I do write leases for, they're big properties. It's sort of like on the down low. But again, we're not really supposed to do that. It's against the town rule. And you're not supposed to rent your house more than twice a year. No matter what that period is. So listen, who's enforcing that? No one really, but if something goes wrong with the house, if the code enforcement has to, they have a party, you're in real hot water if you don't have that rental registry, or,
Sure.
That's where the problem is. But no one's going around, looking to check things.
I just have a client they're looking for Thanksgiving, just
Yeah.
the week of Thanksgiving, and a lot of people aren't willing to give up their one of the two options they have for just that 1 week. They're just
Right. And I wouldn't be able to write that lease. So it's kind of interesting, but.
So back to numbers. I'm surprised you can't tell me how many people or how many households. I know in my bones that New Canaan is a town of 20,000. Darien is a town of 20,000 people. Greenwich is a town of 60,000 people. That has been true as long as I've been alive, right?
A little higher.
How many?
Well,
It's more like slow 70s.
yeah.
Oh, see? Okay. So you guys, a little bit more. I
Well,
guess.
John, I don't have the numbers for you, but I certainly can get them for you if you really want them.
But so I guess what I'm wondering is, well, so why do I know that? Because we're all acutely aware of our taxes and what do we pay for taxes and what do the taxes go for and how many people do we have and how much services do we have to offer? What are how much are the taxes out there?
The taxes out here, people think it's a monthly tax when I show them the tax as opposed to being an annual tax.
Right.
So they're very low. Where they spike a little bit, which I was mentioning.
How low on $1 million house? $1 million.
If that house is $1 million and it hasn't traded and it's been there, it could be $5,300.
Okay. How much for $1 million? How much are the taxes in Greenwich, Rob, on $1 million house?
Well, there isn't an exact, I can't give you an exact number. It'd be maybe marginally higher than that. The way Greenwich does it, our mill rate is around 12, and that applies to 70% of the town's appraised number.
So about $9,000.
No, so it'd be, yeah, it'd be just under, it'd be probably about 8. And then I would say around 70% of our budget annually, of the town budget, goes into the school system.
Same here. And how's that different in the Hamptons?
Well, the school is the thing that drives the most. I don't have the percentage of what it goes into. It's a school, and then the police are the second, because we don't have any sanitation or anything like that. It's really the police and the school systems that, because the fire department is all volunteer.
Okay.
So that's the other advantage of having that diversity of choice in schools in Greenwich. So we all pay real estate taxes, obviously, but the 30% of people opt out of that system. So that funding from 100% of the people funds the high school, the schools for 70% of the people. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yep.
Can I ask you guys about construction? How many people now are willing to do work or raise a house or just buy land? Because here in the city, one of the things that's created a little bit of a problem, and no one really wants to adopt the risk of potentially buying something that needs work, because at a certain point in time, the building could stop people from coming into the building and doing work. So someone who started a renovation that might take normally 9 or 10 months might take now 15 months, 18 months. And how is that working? Scott probably has a better idea of that actually as well.
That's not true, right, Scott?
No, we're certainly experiencing at this point, all of the architects are very busy. There's a lot of work happening. The fact that the architects are busy means that will be much more work for the custom building side of things, both substantial renovations and additions, along with new work. We're definitely seeing in the Greenwich market and Fairfield and Westchester counties, along with the Hamptons, are both extremely strong right now. As you mentioned, in New York City, it's a little bit more dicey. There's more uncertainty. It's a different ballgame. But out in the suburbs, things are going very strongly. And we're seeing with our care division, where we're doing ongoing maintenance and smaller projects, they're just basically booked out. I mean, it's so many people have moved out into homes that require work, and now they're only just starting to do the work. And if you're from New York City, we had a funny call on one of our subcontractors today. A roofer was talking to an owner, and the owner said, "Okay, so should I talk to the superintendent about getting you out here?" It's like, no, you own the house. There is no superintendent. And that concept of being responsible is only dawning on some of the people right now.
That's funny.
But I am curious for both the Greenwich and the Hamptons real estate. Are people commenting on the status of the housing inventory? I hear that essentially there's not much new construction left. Everything new construction's out, has been sold. And so are people commenting on the caliber of the construction and the fact that they need to do work?
Yeah, it's a push and pull. Obviously, I would say guiding buyers from the city in the last few years, they said, oh, well, we can't find what we like. When in fact, there was quite a lot of new construction on. They just didn't like paying a builder. And in fact, some of them were getting extremely almost vindictive in the prices that they were willing to pay for for new construction, and they weren't buying it unless they damn well knew that the builder was getting crushed, and it was bad. So lo and behold, that stuff started to not come up out the ground. Accelerate into this market now, and the new set of buyers like, what? How come there's no new construction? It's like, because these guys have been a pinata for people for the last few years, and they can't get it out the ground quick enough. I think they're so I would tell buyers for the last few years, if you have a burning desire you've always wanted to build custom, I can help introduce you to plenty of people, but just know, unless you're on the water, that there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get carried away with your budget and be out of pocket on day one. It doesn't mean that you don't want to build, and there's plenty of people that still want to build knowing that, but it was a feature of the market. I've seen it. I've sold a few pieces of land very recently. Builders' appetite is definitely up. I think you could make the case from some recent comps that end users, I'd be more encouraging to end users now to actually, if they question themselves about whether they're well suited for going through that process, and the answer is yes, then I would say the financial decisions to do that are definitely easier. Yeah, I think everything. I mean, Scott, you probably don't want to field another call about helping someone put in a pool for start. The pool guys are crazy busy. But I can see it anecdotally, it seems like it's a pretty healthy mix of end user and builder permitting that's going on at the moment.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So in the Hamptons, really leading up before the pandemic, move-in ready was the only buyer that was out here. No one wanted to touch a renovation. Some people now, to Scott's point, they're in the house and they realize, oh, well, we need to do things. And the landscape people are crazy busy. Rob just mentioned the pool people. You talk to anyone in the service capacity right at the moment, everybody wants things done to their house. So that definitely has changed. We don't really have much new construction left at this point. Anything that was on the market was gone during the last 6 months.
Yeah, in our inventory, I was talking with another agent yesterday that, and I haven't cross-referenced these, but I don't disbelieve them. I think our absorption rate in Old Greenwich was just under 3. And that's obviously Old Greenwich and Riverside have been very healthy for a while, and they've weathered the storm. They were a lot more defensive since the 2008 downturn than mid-country, and definitely more than backcountry. But even mid-country absorption rates are down to I believe around 7 or 8, which this time last year they might have been 13 or 14. So I think we're through at least the first stage. I don't know what's going to go on going forward, but once that situation happens, it's giving us an underlying reason for a price movement that is gapping. It's not a straight line the way that things are appreciating. It's very difficult to plot it like that, and which consumers find difficult to get their heads around sometimes. But it takes clearing the decks like this to actually make the price gap a little bit. We've been dealing with it on the way down, where anomaly cheap trades have reset markets very slowly. Now we've got it on the flip side for a change.
Is it going to continue? We all just went through a pandemic-fueled market. And I think the number one question on everybody's mind is, do we think that momentum is going to carry on through this winter and the continued strong demand we have right now into the winter, and it's going to be even more pronounced in the spring?
I think there are a couple of factors that will carry on with our momentum and add to it, and those include the people that, like I mentioned before, that are in rentals. That I know plenty of people that are going to be looking into the spring that aren't coming out of rentals until next summer. I also think there's an effect for friends following friends, which happened after 9/11. I can also see that being fueled by if New York State New York State and Manhattan taxes going up could be a factor for people. Also, a change in the federal, on top of a change in the federal rate, if that happens, all stuff way above my pay grade. I think all of that could decimate that good momentum if we have some type of macro event in the first or second quarter next year that changes the stock market.
Go ahead, Tim.
The people that are selling in both of your markets, where are they going to? Are any of them coming to Manhattan?
So for the Hamptons, a lot of the people who are selling are actually either upgrading or downgrading. So they're selling one and finding something out.
Staying within the market.
Staying within the market. They're seeing a chance to, some people are underwater, you know, they bought at a height and it was just sitting there and they're cashing out, but they're pretty much staying here, because they want to have something out here. No one has just gone back to New York. That's not been anyone I've dealt with.
Same. Yeah, same. That's no different from normal. I think anyone that I saw, I think most agents in Greenwich would agree with this. It's a very, very unusual situation where someone's moved to the suburbs and thought it really wasn't for them and they've moved back. It's a very low percentage just normally. I think one of the features of this market is that it's created a couple of new problems, and I've lost deals this summer for people that, great, we know where the liquidity is for your family house that you've been wanting to downsize out of but have been underwater for years. They're not going to lose as much, or they might be made whole, but at least it's a better. But the problem is, if they want to stay in town, you compete. If you're and sometimes downsize the houses are more expensive. I'm not, it's not always taking money off the table, but go to the water, move downtown, downsize, upsize. But if you're in this zip code, the problems that it's created is that you have to get, you got to pay up for that next transaction, and it's taking it's taking current residents of Greenwich a little bit to, for that penny to drop, that they can't have it, but you can't have it both ways unless you're some type of expert market timer, which doesn't really work very well in real estate, or you've just got lucky. So I've lost deals where we've had contracts on the table, and clients have either lost deals or have been priced out of other deals on the backside of it. But no one, I think I've got one client at the moment that's considering moving to the city, and that's because he's trying to market time Manhattan, and I would pretty much guarantee that when his wife gets involved in the conversation, that she will not be just looking at numbers and won't do it.
So I just shared screen. I guess you can all see that on the screen, I hope. That's a snapshot of the last 10 months in Greenwich. And it's a follow-up really on my question, which is, can we sustain this kind of energy? The perception is that Connecticut is on fire and Greenwich leads the Connecticut market. And the fact is, we do. We have 391 closings in the first 10 months of this year, and last year, 245. And when I open up the stats, I don't know if you can see all that. That's a breakdown of the under $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. You see that all sectors are doing well. It's not limited to the bottom of the market. The top of the market, over 7 million, we've got 24 sales versus 14 at this time a year ago. Do you want to comment on any of these, Rob? I mean, if anything, you find you want to comment on, I'd love to hear it. I know I'm just popping this up for the first time.
I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. I would say the interesting thing is having different conversations with clients about this, because as much as the media, it was very frustrating being an agent in Greenwich in the last few years with dealing with media comments that were coming out. They were really being hard on Connecticut's political situation, which definitely has its troubles, and they're still there. But I always found it difficult to read that stuff written by journalists coming out of New York, who it's hardly, they have the similar problems too. And they were kicking us while we were down for a long time. Since COVID, I haven't seen one article about that, and the new story for them to write about is the Suburban Shift, which is a great story, but I think they're over egging it a little bit too. So if you have something that's built within the last 10 years with 10-foot ceilings in a neighborhood, or that ticks the most amount of boxes, you could argue that year on year you may be able to get somewhere between 10 and 20% on the broad range of upside from last year. If you have
numbers in front of us show that we had an average closing price of 2.8, and now it's 3 million. And
right, but then that's offset by the fact if you have a house that was tricky to sell last year, people are more flexible on certain things. But if it's 8-foot ceilings with no yard, with a lot of wetlands, or whatever the hair on it is, it's your price appreciation has not been like that. You have a little bit more liquidity, but there's not it's not, pricing isn't it doesn't raise all ships the same.
how come condos look so weak? They look weak because we had 148 sales and now we only have 104, and the average price is down 7%. I would have thought that all those New Yorkers trying to get out of the city
No,
who own condos and co-ops would be comfortable in a.
No, it's funny. It's a funny thing that so our condo market isn't very large, and a lot of them are concentrated on downtown Greenwich. And for one of the reasons our market has been so soft for so long, all these suburban markets, is that people were staying urban for the last 15 years. People were staying in cities longer, not just New York, all across the country. Now that's changed, and like I said, their average age is younger. What they don't want is to move from the city into a place where they feel crammed again. So backcountry Greenwich, for example, which is the weakest part of our market, has seen I've seen an increased appetite for large lots and space and privacy. I have where it's still not gangbusters in that part of town, but it's marginally improved because people like those size lots, and not being impacted, and their social life or their family life not being impacted by other people. That's a plus. What isn't a plus, there's a 10 or 12,000 square foot house that when they call a builder, it's going to cost them $2 or $3 million to renovate, and they don't want a 10 or 12,000 square foot house anyway. They definitely don't want to. The market's told us that they definitely don't want to move out of a city into a semi-urban environment in downtown Greenwich. And I love downtown Greenwich. It's above a certain price point, it tends to be a current Greenwich resident that is looking for something that's easier to pack up and use as a base on for half the year while they're in other parts of the country. What's been interesting though is the positive shot in the arm we've had with people being able to sell their downsizer houses normally shakes the tree and gets all the other stuff, the secondary and tertiary transactions going. That's happened, but it hasn't, even those downsizers haven't been flocking to high-end downtown condos like they might have done 10 years ago.
The reality is that when people leave Manhattan, the first thing is, I want a yard, I want space.
Yeah, it's
so that's really
thing.
A change of life living completely.
It's the most overvalued piece of suburban real estate, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's like trying to change someone's political affiliation on Facebook. It's not going to happen. So if someone comes out, but you're 100% right. If someone's making that move, there's some things that are embedded in that move, and that is probably number one for a lot of people. So 10 years later, they're bitching about their yard bills and the fact that their kids don't use their yard, and they sell their house and they can't wait to get rid of it.
For sure.
But guess what? They're going to sell that house to someone that values it, that doesn't know any better anyway. So it's kind of a weird one, the yard, but it's definitely a plus.
Those gardener bills are for real though.
They are, let me tell you.
So what's the difference in transactional costs between your different markets? Because in Manhattan, you have transfer taxes, you have flip taxes, you have mansion tax, there's a whole bunch. It's probably 6 to 8%. What is it like where you guys come from?
So in the Hamptons, the biggest thing that shocks everyone is the Peconic tax, which is 2%. Right. And you can tell them and you tell them and you tell them, And then once they see the closing costs, they're like, what is this? And they're trying to get the seller to pay for it.
That's a one-time.
It's a one-time, it's on your way in, it's not on your way out. And it's 2% of the value of the sale price. And was started well over 30 years ago. It was the purpose mainly was to protect all the farmland.
It's been a wonderful thing.
It's absolutely wonderful. And now they're actually buying homes that are on the market at fair market value. So it gets appraised. They don't come after you. But if I have a listing that is near the water, has wetland issues, can't expand, because once you go to an expansion that's 50% more than the price of the house, not the property, the price of the house, you have to kick into all the new FEMA rules. So it's actually better to sell it to the trust, and then they actually demolish the house and turn it into nature, so that it becomes trails if they can. But that's the biggest thing. And then we only have the 1% mansion tax. It doesn't go up on the scale, which I know it does in the city. The transfer tax is the responsibility of the seller. And then the other is so it's really from 3 to 5%. Because the mortgage tax kicks in, and everybody's bringing financing to the table. Even though every deal we do, no matter what the price point, it does not have a mortgage contingency. It has an appraisal contingency now, but not a mortgage contingency, because you can continue to shop and go someplace else.
You do a high percentage of cash deals, I'm assuming, though, also.
Well, everything is a cash deal, but then everybody brings money to the table. So, but you have to put the appraisal in. And John and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, that you get the leads in the New York Times and the Post and whatnot. The prices are going through the roof and overpaying. That's not happening. People are definitely getting their asking price and maybe a little bit more, but it has to appraise. And if it's not going to appraise, then it's not going to work, because everyone's bringing a bank to the table. And you just have to explain that to the seller that, I had a property that was in the East Hampton Village, and we had 3 buyers. It was a $2.5 million property, and all 3 were going, and the sellers wanted to turn it in best and final. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You take the one without the contingency, and we hope that this appraises, and it did. But if you jack that up to 2.6, 2.7, it wouldn't have appraised, and then we would have had a bigger problem.
Yeah, Rob, you experienced the same thing?
So our tax is a little different. We and I'm not trying to do this to knock the Hamptons, but if I'm competing with buyers and they're considering Westchester, we don't have a mansion tax. We don't have a mortgage tax for the buyer. So the only thing you're paying as a buyer to buy real estate is your attorney and title insurance, which is set by the state, which is also lower than New York. The title insurance is marginally less as well. So it's very inexpensive to buy property. There is a transfer tax that sellers pay, which has just gone up a little bit for houses above the mid 2s, but generally it's a reasonably it's less friction than New York, than Westchester.
What's that percentage
for the transfer tax?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit to the town. It's like and then it's a sliding scale. So on 2 million, it's going to be around 1.5%, and then it'll average in, on 10 million, it would probably be like just above 2%. And then, but it's a little more complicated than that, because if you're selling and staying in Connecticut, then you can clause a little bit of that back at a future date. So they try to introduce it, an element of it as a leaving the state tax, but long and the short of it, it's going to be between 1.4 and 2.2 probably.
And our tax out here is just one flat. It's 0.004.
What?
That's
Wait,
it.
what?
Yeah, the transfer tax.
The transfer tax. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a question in the chat from John Bainton saying that markets like New Canaan, Wilton, and North Greenwich what we call the most rural, we'll call it the 4-acre zone. All those towns with 4-acre zone, they picked up this year. And for the same reasons these markets were soft, mostly because they're harder to commute to, do you think this will swing back in a couple of years? John thinks that this wave of 4-acre zoning being hot is going to crash. Does anybody agree with him? I don't think it's going to crash. I think that this is not a
It couldn't go
one-year
much. It couldn't go much lower than it was.
You think it will crash?
No, it couldn't have gone that much lower than it was at.
Right.
So,
Do you think that this need for wide open spaces and more lawn or more space is a 1-year pandemic fueled trend, or is it the beginning of, say, a 5-year trend, 10-year trend?
I don't know whether it's a long-term trend to go back to having more space. I think it's definitely got some time associated with it. But those backcountry properties in Greenwich, and I know New Canaan was the same, were so big. I mean, the stuff I've sold in the last few years was literally 50 cents on the dollar from 2005. Look at what Manhattan or the Hamptons has done. Obviously, the Hamptons is strongly correlated to, like, as you said, Wall Street and Manhattan real estate market. But you had people that were, $5-8 million in on their house in backcountry that were selling them in the last 2 years for 50 cents on the dollar in a 15-year period. It's horrible. So some modest amount of price appreciation, I think, was due. I think the other aspect to it is, I think backcountry has a supply problem as much as it has a demand problem. As much as it had a demand problem, it's got less of a demand problem now. But there is very little 5,000 to 7,000 square foot new-ish construction available in those areas. One I can think of that went on recently, that was listed last year, went on and sold very quickly this time around, and probably had a couple of people interested in it. There's a supply problem there, so it's a little bit difficult to gauge the market.
Scott, why do we have a supply problem in backcountry? I mean, all your customers who want to hire you to build them their dream house, can they not find land in backcountry Greenwich, Stamford?
Well, I think it is tricky, as Rob's bringing up, that you have a lot of really, magnificent houses that'll have a lot of money put into them. However, they don't meet the style of today. They may have the wrong design style. They may, it may be 30 years old and you need a new mechanical system, and the lighting is an old system, and the insulation's not good, and you got to replace the appliances. And before you know it, if it's a house that's bigger than what you want, it becomes a renovation problem. I think there's still lots of opportunity there, but I think you have to hunt and peck, and you got to have the good realtors that can guide you. Otherwise, it's very difficult to find the right thing for what you're looking for.
But are your customers having difficulty finding land?
They're having difficulty finding homes that we talk to people that have seen 100 houses. They haven't liked any of them, and it's time that they need to build. Then comes that issue of how do you find a house that actually rates as a tear down, especially as the COVID crisis has hit. And if a house is livable, somebody might have grabbed what would have been a tear down and is actually living there because they needed to get their kids into school and do something different. And again, tear down in Greenwich, there's some things that are real tear downs, honest to God, they deserve to be torn down, nobody questions. Others you look at and go, well, that was a pretty nice house. So it's tricky. But I do not think there's a surplus of land on the market, or it's easy to find something that you're going to custom build on.
Okay.
It's a very topographically, there are large amounts of land up there, but they're not all, there's a lot of rock, there's a lot of wetlands, it's a lot more. There's a lot more topography than people realize that can cost. Not only might not be usable, but it also can add a lot to the construction costs.
I want to get back to John Bainton's question and answer it directly. I think the commute is less of a factor in 2020. I think the commute is going to be less of a factor. I think this is a permanent trend because people are starting to say, I don't have to go into the city every day on the 609 train. I can go to the city 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And I think, therefore, that the Hamptons are now an option for full-time living for a lot of these people. Backcountry Greenwich, backcountry Weston is up 250%. Wilton up 250%. I'm going to answer John's question and say, I don't think that changes over the next 5 years. I think these people are making a permanent shift and making changes to their houses, adding home offices, and making a permanent shift toward doing more of the work out of the house. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong, but I do think for the same reasons that those markets were dragging, that when this all settles down a little bit, we get back to a little bit more of a normal again, we're going to see people saying, well, I want to be part of a town. There's a reason why the dirt down by the waterfront is more expensive.
What is that behind you? Is that Greenwich Harbor?
It is 5 Mile River.
5 Mile. Oh, 5 Mile River.
Marion and Rowayton.
Got it.
So, yeah, so I mean, like back to rule number 1 of real estate, location, location, location. I mean,
everybody in Rowayton values neighborhood. They love neighborhood. They go for Rowayton because it is a really charming neighborhood and everybody knows everybody. So you're right. That is one of the greatest attributes for Rowayton. Love Rowayton for the neighborhood feel. I do, but we're talking about backcountry, and is backcountry gonna crash?
I'm not saying it's going to crash. I just think it's a pendulum that's swinging up right now, and I think it could possibly swing back down.
Tim, are people actually commuting from the Hamptons this year?
I wouldn't say they're commuting on a weekly basis, but definitely people are going in. But people are out here, full-time, offices all set up. I have a lot of friends as well as clients that are in the tech world. None of them are going back. They're all working from wherever.
Roberto went out to Southampton for what, 6 months? You didn't go back and forth. And when you were done, you came back to the city.
I started to commute and it started to get a little onerous, and that's a tough thing because I would go in and come out at the end of the day. But I think being back,
just buy a faster car.
It's different. If you're a true New Yorker and you begin, as you start coming back and you start feeling the energy of the city, you're just going to want to be back. You're still going to want your option, but you're going to want to be back. Like these people, a lot of these people, especially the people in the Hamptons, they haven't let go of their properties, it seems,
right.
And those vacant, and now Manhattan is actually, it's a good value. And and it's just like water. It's just going to fill in and all the demand's going to come back. People want to be here, just not quite yet, but it's coming.
Can I tempt you to Connecticut? Why would you, a committed New Yorker, a committed Southampton, weekend houser, why aren't you in Greenwich? Why aren't you in Rowayton?
I've never even been there.
Well, that's our problem.
No, I like the beach, and I like, I'm not a commuting type of person. I came from Virginia and DC and Maryland, and I came here, and I didn't come here to live in a suburb. I came here to live in Manhattan. I didn't even come here to live in Brooklyn.
Didn't even consider Connecticut. And wouldn't now. Rob just told you how cheap it is.
I'll come visit you. No, I think it's beautiful, and I really respect everybody who's there. I'm sure it's an amazing part of the country, but it's just not something that, it doesn't suit my sensibilities.
The point of follow your friends is a very strong one. I think that a lot of your friends were going to the Hamptons. That's probably what drew you out there. You want to be with your friends on the weekends.
Sure.
And now you're going to see more families.
And we have a lot of
a
lot of people who bought out here to a comment that was made earlier, and all their friends are buying. So it's kind of amazing that no one's giving up New York, but they want that exit.
Yeah, but it's everyone has different reasons, and I completely respect yours, Roberto. I didn't want, when I lived in London, I had no interest whatsoever in being a suburban, living in the suburbs in England. So I get it. But it's funny that I've had a couple of clients this summer who I've sold them houses, and then next month there's the sister or the brother is calling me and following them out there, and they're there's I think people have a broader choice with their commute. I think the towns that are going to win out and be the most defensive are the ones that have supported the highest prices historically, like Greenwich, that have better infrastructure. They have a more diverse population. And when I say diverse, most people from the city that haven't been to Greenwich don't really put Greenwich and diversity together. But it does have a lot of diversity, both socioeconomically and also internationally. Like, one of the reasons people like living in the city is that there's all sorts of there's the guys like next door to you, they have international backgrounds and do interesting things. Greenwich has a lot of people, a lot of international residents that use this town as a primary residence, from Dutch, Swedes, Australians, English, Germans, Brazilians, you name it, Japanese, 4 synagogues, lots of gyms, lots of schools. Those are the things that are very difficult to build on short notice, and that's why the Hamptons will always be very different. And frankly, it's been a better investment in the last 10 years than Greenwich has. So, but it has value for different reasons.
Talk to me about that word investment. When I started in this business, my mother said, go to Greenwich. I was like, why would I go to Greenwich? You need to go to Greenwich because they think differently in Greenwich. I'm like, really? Oh yeah, they think differently in Greenwich. You need to learn how they sell in Greenwich, how they talk about that. And the very first thing they told me when I got to Greenwich is they raise the finger and they go, now you know, Greenwich is always the last to go into a recession, and it's always the first one to come out. Greenwich is a blue chip stock, my friend. And so these eye-popping prices that you're seeing, put it out of your head. It's not going to crash. Greenwich never crashes. It may have momentary blips. And then they pulled out, and this is to my point on value, they pulled out a chart of the last 25 years of the stock market returns. And overlaid on it was a chart of the Greenwich real estate returns, how much Greenwich real estate had gone up each year for 25 years. And they said, see, we've outperformed the stock market in 22 of the last 25 years. And
I'm sure that lady or gentleman is hiding under a stone right now if the last the last 10 years.
According to you, since 2005.
But
yeah.
How are we talking about value? How are we talking about value? Are we saying, Greenwich is not done great for the last 10 years and it's poised to rebound? Are we talking about the very soft Connecticut market is poised for a rebound? How important is this notion of it's a good investment to our clients in these high-end markets? We're talking about $10 million houses in Greenwich, $10 million houses in the Hamptons. These people must be asking that question, right?
No, not really. And I'm not saying that because they're financially not sophisticated. They are. Anyone buying a $10 million house that's qualified to do it is, it's generally they've worked hard for their money and they value it. They don't want to give it away. But I would say there's been a shift on looking at real estate as an investment, inverted commas, to something that is the nicest thing that they can live in, that supports their lifestyle, that doesn't need to return them X% a year. I think people have had to make that shift because if they've wanted to live in these suburban markets, because the reality is they haven't been great investments. But for the same reason that someone could hire a very high-end builder and put a lot of money into a house knowing that they're never going to get it out, it's at a certain point, and that price point is different for everyone. It's a luxury asset rather than an investment. And I think people have changed their mind depending on which market they've lived in different parts of the country on that. There isn't a presumption that your house is going to be worth 5 to 7% more every year. People get that, and the more sophisticated they are, the more they understand that, and they're going into that with their eyes wide open. The last few years, people aren't. They're not talking about an investment. They're talking about what's the most defensive where's the most defensive place to live that supports my lifestyle and is within my budget? Where's my downside on this rather than what's my upside?
And that's very
fascinating to me that the #1 agent in Connecticut with $150 million of sales this year, just pointing that out to everybody, is saying that you don't have to defend this as an investment class, that people have gotten away from that kind of thinking and said, I just want to live where I want to live in the best possible lifestyle I can afford.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be flippant about it.
No.
But that too is a luxury.
Yeah, and I think people approach real estate more so in those terms. Not everyone's different, but more so. I think I mean, listen, everyone needs somewhere to live. Rental prices are also through the roof. And then you get into the argument of, do I want to spend $5 million on a house or spend $20,000 to $25,000 a month on after-tax money on a rent and flush that down the toilet too. So everyone's cutoff point for rentals or buying or just genuinely wanting a nice place to live. For some people, that might be $1 million. For some people, it might be 25. But they go into it obviously not wanting to protect their downside more than with the feeling that they're going to be selling this in 5 to 7 years time for a huge, I think that was probably a feature of the Manhattan market, much more so in the, coming out of like after the downturn in like 11, 12, you guys had an awesome run up there. And I'm sure that speculation and presumption of increased value happens very quickly when your market gets bullish, but we just didn't have one for so long. I wasn't avoiding the issue. Everyone knew that this was a soft market. So it was a different way of talking about real estate than just an investment. If you're talking about a primary residence, I've got investor clients too that are looking to enhance yields and rental portfolios, and that's obviously not what you're asking about, and that's a whole different conversation. But for the person that's looking to use Greenwich as their primary residence, it was a much bigger picture than just, is my house an investment?
And for the Hamptons, we use a different word. Luxury could fit. It's desire. They just desire to want to be here, be around their friends. They desire a location based on where their friends are. There's really no sort of investment kind of conversation that's being had.
So that's a great segue. I only have 2 minutes, but Greg Sages is there, and we were talking earlier. He has rental properties in Greenwich, and he was thinking maybe it's time to sell them. Is this the time, Rob? Is this the time to get out, or is he going to miss this great price appreciation in the Greenwich market and should wait a little longer?
It's a conversation I was having with another investor at the moment, and like the same way as there are new problems, the new problems for investor clients are they've seen their yields be enhanced quite a lot this year. The question is, how long is that rental squeeze going to come on? Because selling it at market when they could make depending on how long they've owned the property, there's potentially, they're sitting on a really good rental return year.
My rents aren't turning over. Greg's hasn't turned over. He's still getting his pre-COVID rental prices. And a lot of us are nervous that when they come up for renewal, we won't get these super duper COVID prices on our rentals, that the long-term prospects aren't great.
Yeah, I sold this. I had a couple of investment properties that I sold. I closed on them about 6 weeks ago. If that answers the question.
You're a seller.
I sold three rental properties 2 months ago.
All right.
Can I ask a question before we have to go?
Yeah.
Listen, just curious as to, like, we have a tremendous amount of foreign buyers here. However, we haven't seen a foreign buyer in 7 months at all. And when that starts to open up, our market is going to experience some substantial increase in demand. There's going to be, and I'm just wondering, do you guys have any foreign buyer market?
Not well. my perception of of the Asian money that came into New York a while back was almost like, I mean, money laundering is not the right word, but the sovereign wealth funds that ramped up the New York City speculation 5, 6, 7 years ago, I always thought from an outsider looking in was a very fake market. I think you guys are always going to have a genuine dollar asset investor, guys buying into your market. It's a blue chip market. We don't have that. And never have had it as someone looking to park dollar assets. They go to Manhattan, they don't come to the suburban markets. We have a lot of international buyers who are choosing to live in Greenwich because of, like we've talked about multiple times, they have other friends from their domestic markets that are in Greenwich, and it's a place that they're comfortable with. So it's a very international town, but it's not international money that's coming to park dollars in Greenwich and sit on it and rent it out. We don't have long lists of large landlords.
Just Greg Sages.
Sorry, what'd you say, John?
I said just Greg. He's the he's the only major Greenwich landlord on the call right now.
Seriously major.
There's not many.
Transactional in the Hamptons.
I'm sorry.
You probably have more of that in the Hamptons, I'd have thought.
Well, you do have definitely an international crowd. A lot of it is housed in Southampton. It's kind of interesting. And there are a lot of trophy properties that foreign investors are, but it's really not as big of, and I can't remember the name of the firm that was actually out here in Southampton, East Hampton, that was dedicated to international buyers, and they actually closed up shop out here. Just because it wasn't, it's there, but it's not the biggest part of our pie.
I think this was a great call. Are there any parting words of wisdom from my guests or Roberto? But I think I learned a lot. I think I learned that the stereotypes of East Hampton is just a seasonal market, just a rental market, are beginning to change. We're starting to see a change of that market to a more permanent residences, and that you say that prices are not astronomical, that I can still get in for a reasonable price. And I'm hearing that from Rob Johnson that the always solid Greenwich market, which continues to be solid, is starting to see a seasonal market, maybe for the first time, and beginning to adjust on how to deal with that. Yes. And it's exciting. I think it's very exciting for both markets. Sorry, Roberto, both markets that New Yorkers are taking an interest in the suburbs. Go ahead, Roberto. You can make your closing remarks.
No, that's there. We're going to listen, for the people who don't come back, there is going to be enough demand that's going to, so many people want to come here, and it's actually a good value. So I'm not concerned. I personally think that we're kind of bottoming out. It might be a slow 2 or 3 months, but I think that things are going to start to improve. And I think people are going to want to get settled for the following school year.
I'm excited to be able to refer people to Roberto for the first time. When they say, are there any screaming deals out there? I'll say, well, Roberto's apparently got all these fabulous apartments that need buyers.
They're all in my pockets.
Go ahead, Tim.
So Rob and Tim, thanks so much, by the way. And
thank you, Roberto.
Scott, thanks for coming. Scott,
thank you for having us.
You're right.
I learned a lot.
Thank you for giving us our moment in the sun in the suburbs. You guys will be. You're right. Your market is so dynamic that it obviously will take a little while, but it's a very resilient market, and there's a lot of people that are going to want to be in New York very soon, I think.
So Roberto, make sure that you make a list of really fabulous properties so that we can send you some referrals.
Got them right here.
All right, got it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
See you guys. Take care.
Interesting, John.
Shout out to Dominic in Sydney.
And Sydney. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Dominic and Sydney. Bye-bye, everybody.
Dominic's the best.